Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. This podcast is all about our journey into the woods of ourselves, getting to know who we are, where we are, and where we're going in life so that we can create the life that we want to live. It's about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. It's also about mindset. Our beliefs are such an important part of this journey, and there are so many ways for us to change our mindset so that we can more easily live a life of expansive joy. This podcast is also about going literally into the woods and spending time in nature, and how that can help us on our own personal journey of self-knowledge. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now let's get into this week's episode. Hello, adventurers, and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 380. This is your host, Holly Wharton, and I'm back with another guest. This week's guest is my friend, Sarah K Brandis. I was inspired by her recent article on Medium to invite her onto the show. I've got some ambitious goals coming up with my running, and I want to be sure that I don't end up burned out from all the training for that, combined with kickboxing and hiking. So while this specific conversation is about running and marathon running, the things we discuss can apply to all types of fitness and adventures, hiking, cycling, whatever. And as you'll hear in this episode, they also apply to work, business, and life in general. Now, Sarah was also a recent guest blogger on my website, and she wrote a post called Solo Trail Running for Women, Staying Safe in the Outdoors. So I'll link to that in the show notes so you can check that out. About Sarah K Brandis. Sarah is a mental health writer, an enthusiastic amateur distance runner, an elective orphan and content marketer. Although she is trying to shed that last role and simplify her life. Having cut contact with her abusive parents at age 16, Sarah's life has been an adventure filled with learning things the hardest way possible. Her latest mission is to understand and break that habit of going the long way around and to share that journey in her writing. So I'll link in the show notes to share Sarah's books and where you can follow her on Medium. In the meantime, what are you going to learn on this episode? We talk about how to know when you're experiencing training burnout because it can be hard to see, what to do to recover from training burnout, how to adjust the rest of your lifestyle to match your training schedule, things you can do to prevent burnout in the future, and what it actually means to listen to your body. What are the things that you need to pay attention to? Because it sounds really kind of nebulous. You need to learn to listen to your body. What does that mean? That's what we talk about in this episode. So I hope you find this interesting and useful. I really, really enjoyed this conversation, and I think I learned a lot. You're going to learn a lot, and I think it's just a really useful thing to have in mind as we set our goals for the new year, and as we work to achieve those goals. So, without further ado, here is the episode. Hi, Sarah.
Hello, how are you?
Good. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. It's very timely for me.
Yeah, me too, actually. I've been listening to your podcast since the days of the Hello Gorgeous Lady, so I'm really excited to be on.
The Hello Gorgeous Lady that no one liked, and finally people told me.
But she's memorable.
She is memorable. I did like her. I liked her voice. So that was the Scottish woman that used to do my intro and outro. She was just a voice actor that I hired on Fiverr, but she's long gone. So today we are going to talk about what to do when our passions lead to burnout. What to do when we overtrain for the things that we love and then we can't do them anymore. I myself get caught up a lot in my outdoors adventures and training, and I often don't take into consideration sufficient recovery time and work-life balance. So I was really excited to read your article on Medium, which we're going to link to in the show notes, because it just felt very, very timely to me, because I'm starting to get super excited about running and doing races, and I'm realizing I need to be mindful about how I get myself into this. So
yes, absolutely.
Go ahead.
I'm the same.
Yeah. So how?
Yeah, no, just to say I'm the same.
Yeah, it's so hard. It's so hard to find that balance because it's like I get passionate and I get excited and then too much. So what is your sport of choice and how did you get into it?
So my sport of choice is running, and I use that term quite generally. Some people are very specific. They like road running or they like a certain distance. For me, it's any running on any terrain, any distance. It all appeals to me. And I got into it with a really classic quarter life crisis.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So I was 26. I was in a bad job. Not that it's bad in general, just that it wasn't at all aligned with me. I was running pubs and venues, and I am an introvert and a writer. So you can see how that was a bad decision to begin with. I was in a bad marriage that was bad by definition, and I was just really unhappy. I'd never run at that point, apart from to the bus, really. And I was drinking quite heavily with my area manager because he was probably feeling similarly quarter-life crisis-y at the time. And we sort of come to this drunken conclusion that we needed to have some sort of goal, something outside of the work that we weren't terribly passionate about. And he'd seen somewhere online an advertisement for the Arctic Circle Marathon, which is completely bonkers. At the time, it cost about £30,000 to get a charity place in it, and it's completely insane. And I loved it, the idea. I thought it sounded amazing. We were very drunk. Did I mention that?
Yes.
I was like, yeah, hell yeah, I want to do this. And then in the morning, with his hangover remorse, he started to back out of it and say it was a terrible idea. I kind of agreed that raising 30k would be very hard, and certainly without him helping me, I didn't think I could do it on my own. But I did want to run a marathon all of a sudden with no idea really what a marathon was. I didn't even know the distance. I didn't know it was 26.2 miles. I didn't know how long it would take to run one, how long it would take to train. But I got onto Google with my thumping hangover, and the first marathon I found was New York, 2009. So I pulled out my credit card and I bought myself a place.
Wow, that's a huge trip to make for your first race.
Yeah, go hard or go home.
I really like hearing your story because I started running about the same time in life, and I had a really difficult business and I had a really difficult relationship, and running, I think, was what kept me going during that. It probably kept me alive, and it just kept me like surviving my extreme stress that I was going to. So running has a very special place in my heart because I think it just got me through a very, very dark place in my life.
Something I hear from a lot of people. A lot of people find running when they're in a dark place, and it gives them such an all-consuming focus, because when you're running really hard, you're focusing on so many essential things like breathing and staying upright and not smacking into a tree and not getting hit by a car. And it makes you be present, and it stops you from ruminating about all the things that are wrong. Plus the endorphin rush, plus the achievement, plus the fitness. It's a really healthy thing to be doing.
Yeah,
for the most part. I mean, obviously, today we'll talk about how it's not so healthy as well.
Yes, I agree. It was absolutely life-changing for me because I wasn't at all athletic before I started running. I didn't do sports in school. I thought I just wasn't a sporty kind of person. And so running also changed that mindset for me because I realized that if I trained, I could get better. And it was like I didn't know that before. I just thought either you were born athletic or you weren't, and I wasn't. So that was that.
I know. And running is one of those amazing sports where you don't time out too young. It's not like gymnastics where you have to be doing it when you're 11. Otherwise, you've got no hope. It's one of those things that you can really improve with age. And I love that. It gives me something to look forward to in my 40s, 50s and beyond.
Yes, exactly. Well, we just really got obsessed over lockdown about watching all of these documentaries about ultra runners. And in my mind, I'm starting to fantasize, like, what if I could do something like that? That would be amazing. And then my mind goes, no, you're too old for that. And then in one of the documentaries, someone made the comment that like, oh, a lot of ultra runners are in their 40s and 50s. And I was like, oh, maybe I'm not too old. So yeah, it really is something that you can do all your life. And when I go to races and I see older people, like this race that Augustine and I did in Exmoor a couple weekends ago, there were like people in their 70s running this race, and there were older people running the ultra as well. And this was a really, really tough course. And I just thought, God, that's what I want when I'm older. Like I want to be in the kind of shape where I can do these things.
I think the longer the distance, like in terms of it being a marathon or an ultra, probably to some degree the better the age is for you, because I mean 5 and 10Ks, that's all about pushing yourself and being speedy, and that's better when you're younger perhaps, but with distance running it's about pacing yourself and mental resilience and being sensible and knowing when to quit. And these are not things that we have in our 20s, they're things that we learn as we grow.
That's a really good reflection, because One of my biggest problems with running is mindset. So my mindset has been great for business and other kinds of goals, but my running mindset has been trash. So it's really hard for me to kind of push through those times when my brain's going, oh, it's just not a good day. Maybe you should walk. Or, oh, this is hurting, so maybe you should slow down. Or it's just really hard for me to kind of get that mindset to keep going when I don't feel fabulous. And of course, I don't always feel fabulous when I'm running. There's always a little something that's not quite right.
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely had not just days like that, but really expensive marathon days that I've paid a lot of money to be there. And then on race day, I've thought, oh, I don't feel like it. That the last one that I can think of that I didn't want to start, I was in a terrible mood for some reason. It was Venice Marathon 2018, and it was a much older runner, a gentleman called Daniele, who spotted me struggling. And we don't really speak the same language. My Italian is basic, to put it mildly. It's really bad. But with his very bad grasp of English and my very bad grasp of Italian, we were sort of going along together for kilometres and kilometres. And it was him that kept me going. I always find if I'm struggling in a longer distance race, find someone mature, find someone that looks like an experienced runner, because they've got it down. And it's not about what your legs can do, it's about your brain. Yeah, we've all had those races and those days, definitely. I still struggle with keeping myself going. I'm not always motivated, and that's human.
Yeah, I think so. And that's a really good piece of advice, because Augustine just ran his first run a couple weeks ago at Exmoor, and it was a 50K. And he had never run a race before, and that was his first. And it was a really challenging course compared to what we'd done. Obviously, he trained for it. It wasn't like he just woke up and thought, I'll just do a 50K run. Like, he had the ability to do it, but still, he had never done an event like that. And about 2/3 of the way through the race, he found this older guy who was super experienced ultra runner. He's maybe 10 or 15 years older than Augustine. And they ran together the last bit of the race. He said that was what kept him going. That was what kept him motivated and happy about the run, because they were chatting the whole time, and he just learned so much from this guy.
Yeah, I love that. That's brave for a first race as well.
Yes, it is. Well, he'd originally signed up for the half marathon, and then he kept training kind of longer and longer distances, and it got to the point where he was like, well, I've just run 60K last weekend, so maybe I should sign up for the 50K instead of the half marathon, because I know I can do 50K. So, yeah. So let's talk about, done. Yeah, I know. I was so impressed. It was, I did the 10K, and it was really, really rough course. So I can't even imagine what he went through. So we're here today to talk about the dark side of running. When we train too much and when we get training burnout. So what is training burnout?
So it's really just burnout with the word training stuck on the front of it. We all know what burnout is. Really, that's all it is. We all know what burnout is. It's so common these days to have career burnout. And with training burnout, it's literally just that. It's not tiredness. It's not just I've run too much and I need a rest day. I think the difference between exhaustion and burnout is when a bit of rest doesn't fix it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's this theory going around in the psychology world with career burnout that a holiday is how you can tell if you're tired or burnt out. If you go on a holiday for a week and come back and feel refreshed, great, you were just really tired. If you go on a holiday for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and you're still not ready to come back to work, you're burnt out. And I think it's really similar with training. If a couple of rest days and a good carb binge on pizza doesn't fix it, then you've overdone it at some point, and you need to start really paring it back and reassessing, because you've burnt yourself out. And it can be a combination of physically and mentally and emotionally as well. And it can feel really tough. You can go from loving running and loving what you're doing to feeling really demotivated, and because you're missing all those endorphins at the same time, it can really push you a bit further down that dark hole.
So how did you know you were in burnout? What were the signs that you saw?
Well, I think I saw the signs, and I knew it intellectually long before I'd admitted it to myself emotionally or spiritually, because I'm tremendously stubborn. And that's clearly how I got to this state in the first place. But for me, it was when I couldn't make my legs move any longer. And my body gave out before my spirit did, because I'm so stubborn. And that's not a good thing. It's really not. You think it is, but it's not. It was 2019, so last year, I'd set myself this arbitrary goal for no good reason to run 4 full marathons in 2019. And I'd got through the first two, and they were sort of relatively back to back, 5 weeks apart.
Ooh.
So I'd done quite a lot of soft tissue damage to myself at that point. I gave myself a month off to recover before starting my summer training block for the autumn marathons. On starting that summer training block, I just couldn't do the long runs. I could do the short training sessions. I had a Sunday, and I realised actually when you asked me for links and things for the show notes, on my YouTube channel there is a video vlog of this. My long run Sunday, which was a total fail. I was trying to push myself out the door for a long run, and it was early in the training plan, so I guess it wouldn't have been more than about 10-12k. It wasn't a stupidly long run, but I couldn't get myself moving, and I took 3 attempts that day. I got up for an early run, failed, came home, went back to bed, told myself that, I just need a nap, I just need another hour of sleep, bit more food, bit more caffeine, try again. Didn't happen. I tried 3 times before I finally admitted that I was done.
Wow. I don't think I would try again in the same day. Like, I think if I had such a bad run that I had to go home, I'd be like, okay, today's not the day. So I'm really impressed that you gave it 3 goes.
Sort of impressed in a bad way, though, right? Because it's not healthy. It's not a good mindset. I think there's a tipping point where you go from being motivated to being like you're self-flagellating after a certain point.
Yeah, and stubborn, as you said. And when you first said that you're really stubborn about that, I was thinking, I'd like some of that. I feel like I need some of that. But it's such a difficult balance to find between giving up too soon and pushing yourself too hard.
And this is the trouble. I think this is going to turn into a bit of a societal rant, and you'll have to pull the plug on me at some point.
No, that's fine.
I think we're raised with this as well, because we're that generation who our parents or our grandparents survived World War II, and we've been brought up with their ethics of, all that, stoicism, and it's a little bit too much for our generation because it doesn't quite apply to us. And we've taken that message of stoicism and we've embodied it, but we're not going through a war. So if we're not suffering that much, then are we being soft? Should we make ourselves suffer a bit more?
Yeah.
And we kind of beat ourselves up. And I think we're all raised with slightly the wrong message. And I think we need to be educated on when to rest and that it's okay and it's not shameful to rest.
Yeah. I had a run this morning and I walked a little bits of it. It was 15K, so it wasn't short, but it wasn't long. But it's the longest I've run today, in recent years. But there were points where I just felt like I needed to walk a couple minutes. And I did that a few times and I felt really bad about myself. It was like, this isn't much of an incline. Like, I should be pushing myself. I shouldn't be allowing myself to walk. But then it got to the point where I was just like, you know what? I also really want to enjoy this run. So I think I'll just walk for a minute or two.
It's good for you cardiovascularly. I mean, I don't want to get into a huge science debate, and disclaimer, I'm not a sports scientist, but there are a lot of sports scientists and authors that ascribe to the theory that over a certain distance, you don't want to be working anaerobically and really, puffing yourself out. It's good to stop and bring your heart rate down because you want to stay in the lower heart rate zones to be burning fat, which is the method you want to employ when you're going longer distances. So science says you did fine, Holly.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you, science. Yeah, and I think that's something that I haven't really gotten into is looking at zone 2, zone whatever. Whereas my husband is just starting to work with a running coach and he's given him this 29-week running plan and you've got to train so many minutes or so many miles in zone 2. And I'm like, I don't want to run like that, but maybe I do need to start looking at that. So
yeah, and certainly when I return to running, once I'm done recovering from my burnout, I'll be using probably the Maffetone method, which is really commonly known, and you can Google it and find lots of resources.
Okay, I will link to that in the show notes. And I will look at it myself because I haven't done much research about this. I ran years ago and then I kind of stopped running and now I'm starting again. But it's I'm just going out and running. I'm not really looking at the science behind it. And I think I need to start doing that so I can avoid burnout. So you managed 2 of your marathons in 2019. What happened with the other 2?
So I had that moment in training where my legs just wouldn't work and I had 3 attempts to leave the house. And then after that day, I realized that I was off track and I started to get worried. And one of my marathons I had to cancel because there was no alternative to downgrade to a shorter race. And the other one, which was Bournemouth, I downgraded it to the half marathon, which I did. That was much more suitable for me. I could do that without too much training at that point. But then after that, after I'd got through the autumn with just doing 1 half marathon instead of 2 marathons, but in a good way. It was a positive experience. I actually enjoyed that half because I took the pressure off myself. I went with my friends from my local running group. We had a girls' weekend in the hotel, ate a ton of carbs and just had so much fun. It was lovely. But after that, my body started to crumble on me and I started getting sickness after sickness. And then in January, I caught the virus, and I don't know if it was the virus, but ever since then, I've had a diagnosis of post-viral chronic fatigue. So I've been doing very little training and I'm just being forced to rest now, which it's like my idea of hell. I'm having to learn the lesson.
Yeah. So did you go to the GP, and how do they test for chronic fatigue? Or how do they know?
You can't really test for it. They sort of test for other things. So they make sure you're not vitamin deficient, anemic. Okay. I'm also being tested still, because it's taking ages this year, obviously. I'm still being tested for sleep apnea, which was one of her first assumptions. There is a belief, I suppose, because we don't have enough data to study it, but there's a belief doing the rounds that long COVID is a trigger for sleep apnea. There seems to be a correlation. So I don't know which virus I had, but I'm being tested for sleep apnea still, even now in the end of the year. And they just ended up diagnosing post-viral chronic fatigue for lack of anything else to diagnose. It's one of those things that if you've tested for everything else, nothing else shows up, well, it must be chronic fatigue. So that's what I got.
Yeah, that makes sense. So after this virus, and after you had that kind of 3 times where you tried to run 3 times in one day and you couldn't, and then you did the half marathon, like what else were you feeling? Like how was your body feeling on a day-to-day basis that kind of gave you the clue that something was really wrong?
Bits of everything. So my immune system was lower because I was catching illness after illness. I've always had slightly irritable bowels, but they were worse. I had much worse IBS. I suspected that I had leaky gut around January, February time. So I started to change my diet for that. Had to give up coffee for a while. That was really painful, almost as painful as giving up running. And what else? Yeah, insomnia, waking up tired, worse migraines than usual, just all the fun stuff, general muscle weakness, body aches and pains. But still I couldn't turn off my stubborn streak. Once I got my health sort of to even out a little bit in sort of March time, I started going back to training again. And I had to try that a few times, hit a wall, realize that I couldn't train while I was ill, and then stop again, and then start again, and then stop again. And I think it's only really been this summer, 2020, that I've actually finally understood that I can't push my body right now. It's got to do a thing. It's got to heal first. And then I've got to come back from scratch. I'm not going to be marathon girl next year because that's too much of a stretch and I have to build from nothing again. And I have accepted that now. Yeah, I think the mental challenge has been tougher than the physical challenge for me. Like, despite all the illness, it's the fighting with my own mind that's been really hard. Like, getting myself to accept that this is where I am. That was the hardest. And feeling like this is the appropriate thing and not that you're like giving up or you're lazy or whatever, because those are all the things that would go through my mind. Yeah, absolutely. Lazy. Yeah, weak, all of those things. And that feeling of missing out as well. Yeah. Seeing all my friends going running every week and being like, oh, just hold your coats. You know, that's quite sad. So what have you been doing to recover aside from resting? Have you been changing your life in other ways? Meditating more? I don't know. Yeah. So I've tried all sorts of things. I think I can say pretty confidently that generally supplements are not the answer. That's the first thing I went to when I was first really tired and foggy and suffering from what felt like leaky gut in January and February. I was following all the sort of functional medicine biohacking advice I could find. So anything written by Dave Asprey or Dr. Mark Hyman, I was all over it. I brought all these devices, so all these things that are supposed to make your home healthier. I brought lots of supplements. I just tried shoving lots more stuff into me, vitamins, minerals, anything I could get my hands on that was supposed to help. Probiotics, prebiotics. I ate kimchi. That's disgusting and I hate it. I gave up coffee. I did all of these things in the stubborn belief that there would be one silver bullet that would suddenly turn my energy back on, and none of it worked. So once I finally got over that phase and stopped buying pointless things on Amazon, then it sort of became, okay, what else can I do? So meditation, I've been really into Qigong lately. That's actually helping a little bit. So that's good. Good. following my doctor's advice, following holistic healers' advice. I'll take a bit of East, a bit of West, and mix it together, a bit of everything. But I think what's actually moved the needle the most for me was stopping going to the gym. And that sounds weird, and it feels weird to say it, but I was still pushing when I shouldn't be pushing. My heart rate still said, no, it's too much. Even really light exercise would push my heart rate too high, and then I'd crash for weeks afterwards. And it was accepting that and stopping exercising entirely, even though it felt wrong, even though I was putting on weight, even though I felt lazy, and it wasn't mentally the best thing for me at the time. Physically, it's what my body needed.
So what were you doing at the gym? Were you doing weights, or were you running on a treadmill, or what were you doing there that was too much?
We'd had lockdown.
Right.
So when lockdown started to lift and we were allowed to train in small groups of 6, I think, outside, my local gym was doing a get-together on a Wednesday night in the local park. So I was doing Wednesday night circuits with them in the park. And then on Saturday, I was doing a Zoom circuits class with them, and then going for power walks in between. And that was too much. Yeah. I was really tiring myself out. So I've pared it right back, and I don't walk for more than about 10-15 minutes at a time now, just a couple of Ks, and that seems to be okay for where I'm at, and that's where I'm going to have to build from.
So you're keeping your body moving, but very light and very short, and you're recovering in between.
Yeah, very, very small and gentle. So think Qigong videos for about 10 minutes at a time on YouTube, short walks, not running, not getting my heart rate high. Really focusing on my breathing, keeping an eye on my heart rate and my blood pressure.
And how's your sleep been through this? Were you able to get past the insomnia and actually get the rest that you needed?
Up and down, yeah. As you know, I am a mother of cats, so sometimes I get woken up by the 3 a.m. cat parade. But generally, the insomnia has calmed down quite a lot now. So yeah, I'm doing better sleep-wise. My partner's been on shifts because when the world changed, he went to work at a local hospital as a bed buddy. So sometimes he's out all night, which means I get the bed to myself. Other times he's recovering from doing that, which means I get a night of him sleeping feverishly and kicking me. So it's up and down, but that's just like anyone really. But yeah, the insomnia is gone for the most part, and I do feel the benefit when I've had a good night's sleep. It makes a big difference to my levels of focus.
Yeah, absolutely. So how have you changed the rest of your lifestyle to help you recover? I know you've made some changes in your business.
Yeah. So as much as I've changed my training, that wasn't really the biggest or the most important change for me. What's really been making a difference to me lately is the change in my work. So I'm a freelance writer now. I don't need to start getting used to saying that because it's very new. Because I was a freelance content marketer. Yay, I know. Until recently, I was doing all the things marketing wise. So go back 4 years ago when I first became freelance, I would do your social media. I'd write your blog posts. I'd rewrite your website. I'd redesign your website. I'd do pretty much anything content marketing wise, advertising, SEO, you name it, I'd do it because I was grasping for work. I was kind of desperate for a new freelancer. But also, I think this is a bit like the mindset thing with running and punishing ourselves. It was a should as well, because I'd had a job that had meant I had to learn everything about digital marketing. I suddenly felt like I should be doing all those things. So it was kind of a guilt thing. And I've not only had training burnt out, I've burnt myself out at work at least twice. I mean, I'm not sure what I'm classing my current chronic fatigue thing as, if it's training burnout, if it's chronic fatigue, if it's work burnout, if it's the magic trifecta of all three. But previous to this, I've had 2 burnouts at work in the last 4 years.
Oh, wow.
So I probably had all of this coming. But that was simply from doing too much work, as well as doing such a wide range of work. I also had, at my worst, and the time that led to my first burnout, I had 14 clients every week.
Oh, wow.
And I had to organize them on a spreadsheet because I was working with very, very small business owners, so solopreneurs, life coaches, people that didn't have much budget, so they could only afford to have like 2 or 4 hours with me a week. So, and I would accept that because I was accepting anything back then. So I had a spreadsheet for the week, and it was like, okay, this person has 2 hours here, and this is the time that they're allowed to phone me or Skype me, and this is the time that I'm doing their work, and then this person's got 3 hours here, so I'm over there. And I think in all of that task switching, which I now know is very cognitively demanding, I really burnt myself out. And I remember the moment I realized I was burnt out then. I was with one of my more regular clients. I was at work, which was embarrassing. She'd organized a weekend of speaker training, and I was listening to one of the speakers, and he was talking about purpose and adventure racing, which obviously is really exciting to me. And I just started crying, and I couldn't stop myself. And I had to sneak out of the room, hoping that nobody saw me, because I was at work and supposed to be being a professional grown-up, but I was sobbing uncontrollably. And I think it's because I'd realized that I was really missing what he was talking about, because I had no adventure or sport or fun in my life because I was overworking, basically.
Wow.
So yeah, that was work burnout number one, and that was in 2016. So it was before I'd got back into running for the second time. I don't think I told you my running timeline, but I'd started in 2009, did a second marathon in 2011, I then took a 7-year break because I got obsessed with my career.
Oh, wow.
I didn't come back to running until 2018. So probably after, yeah, actually it was after that first burnout, listening to that talk and crying about my lack of purpose. There we go. Then I had another existential crisis and started training for London Marathon.
Well, but at least you had more adventure in your life.
Yeah, I certainly did. Yeah.
So what are you doing now? So how have you changed your business now? You said you're focusing on content writing rather than content marketing. But how has that changed from your day-to-day work? Because that sounds really, really stressful, what you're talking about, 3 hours here, 2 hours there. Like that would burn me out for sure. So what are you doing now? What does your business look like now?
So I've switched two essential elements of it. One is the number of clients. I have less clients. I try and take bigger projects with more regularity so that I'm not task switching from person to person. And the other thing is the type of work. Instead of doing 57 different marketing tasks, I'm just writing. And I'm trying to keep it to just content, so blog posts and books.
So you're ghostwriting books.
I am, yes.
How exciting!
But you can't tell anyone because I'm a ghost and it's a secret.
Exactly. Well, we can't tell you who your clients are, but you're ghosting for someone.
Yes.
Oh, that's fantastic. I let go of seeing one-to-one clients a couple of years ago to focus on my writing, and that was a huge shift in my lifestyle. I'm still kind of struggling to make a living from my writing, and I still have, author clients that I work with, but it's made a big difference in terms of, I used to, I loved one-to-one client calls, but I used to get so stressed from just having calls in my calendar. I don't know what it is. And I just completely cut them out altogether. And it's made it a lot easier for me to get through each week, even though I love the work. The calls were just so stressful. Yeah.
Do you think it's the introvert or the Aspie thing? Because you and I are very much aligned there.
Yeah, I think
we love helping people, but it's draining because people are draining.
I think it's both.
Whether they mean to be or not.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. Even if you love them, they're still draining. I think it's for sure both. The Aspiness and the introvertness. It's too bad because I love it. And I think that's also why I stopped having people on my podcast for so long. And then really started kind of itching to get back into these conversations because I really enjoy having deep, interesting conversations with people that are also useful to other people. So I'm really excited to be doing this again, but I know I had to stop it for a while to kind of recharge and, I don't know, recollect and
There's a little bit of a parallel with running and training there as well, because I feel like personally, if I do something that's very people-y at work, I need to sort of plan in a bit of buffer time afterwards to recalibrate and get back into my introvert bubble. And I never used to do that before I burnt out. I used to just keep pressing on. Whereas today, because I know I'm going to spend maybe an hour talking to you, and you're lovely and you don't drain me, but peopling is draining. Yeah. So I've decided that I will spend a good hour or two this afternoon catching up on Riviera because I'm going to need that rest time.
Yeah,
So
yeah, exactly.
you just kind of have to plan for it.
Yeah, and give yourself permission to have that time off and not think like, oh, if I were a normal person, I could press on, or if I were an extrovert or whatever. It's giving yourself that permission to kind of slow down after you've done something that you know is a bit more challenging or stressful or draining.
Absolutely. And I've only just learnt this lesson at 39 and a half years of age. So it was a hard lesson learnt. But, if you're listening to this and if you're struggling with letting yourself live how you need to live, then just know that you're not alone. And we all struggle with the guilt around that. But you have got to give yourself permission to do things your way, because no two humans are alike. You know, we're all individual.
That's the thing. And I think part of the challenge is finding what's right for you, finding the training schedule that works for you, finding the lifestyle that works for you, the work schedule, the business schedule. Like you can look at other people and you can try what they're doing, but you ultimately need to really pay attention to yourself and your body and your energy and figure out what works for you. And that's what makes it so difficult, because there are no, there are recipes. Like I said, you can model other people, but you ultimately need to make your own recipe.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what would you do differently to prevent the burnout if you could go back in time?
So, I've been thinking about this. And for me personally, I wouldn't go back in time and prevent it, because I needed this lesson so badly. It was just part of my life. I needed to learn this. And I needed to learn it the hard way because of my stubborn streak. But with that said, if I was giving advice to somebody else in that way, what would I do differently? Then it would have been really about learning to listen to myself a lot sooner. Like not giving in to the guilt and the negative self-beliefs and the pressure from society that you must do things a certain way. And also not being ridiculous about how many hours in the week I had and trying to be some sort of superhero. And again, this is all led from a dark place. It's all led from guilt and not feeling enough and not feeling like I deserve a day off. The thing is, there are 7 days in the week, whichever way you come at them, and you can't work all 7 days of the week. You cannot. We're not built for that. You have to have rest days. So I would not have been trying to run 4 marathons in a year and running my freelance business the way that I was at the same time. It was probably too much to just run that business, take the marathons out of it. That was probably too much on its own. So trying to throw all that extra sport at it as well was just ridiculous. And something really key that nobody told me, and I had to figure this out, and I want everyone to know, sitting and working at your desk job is not a rest day. If your brain is working, then your adrenal response system is working and your whole body and immune system is stressed. So, your legs might be getting a rest, but actually your body as a whole, as a system, isn't having a rest. So it's not a rest day. A rest day is sitting on the sofa, watching TV, reading a book, not dealing with work. And there's a huge difference. I used to think that I could run a marathon. I actually did this. I ran London Marathon 2018, hottest London Marathon on record. It took me 6.5 hours. I was so dehydrated that I didn't pee between the start village and going to bed at 10 o'clock at night. That's how dehydrated I was. Monday morning, I'd agreed to do a press interview. So 10 a.m. on Monday morning, I've got this woman on my phone asking me questions. She asked me how old I was and I couldn't remember. It was such a bad interview. It didn't even get published. She axed it in the end. And then Tuesday, the next day, I'm shoving myself up the stairs to a client's office to go and do a day of in-house work. Sitting at a desk is not rest or recovery.
Yeah, I think that's I had
to learn that the hard way.
That is such an important thing to point out, because I think I tend to compartmentalize, and because I time block everything in my calendar and it's all color coded. So it's like I've got work time blocked, and then I've got, fitness and running time blocked in other colors. And I think, oh, well, if I'm not doing fitness stuff every single day, that means the days that I don't do them are rest days, even though I might be doing lots of other stuff. So that's a good lesson to hear.
Yeah, no, definitely. You need absolute nothing time.
Yeah. And
We
I
really
think
do. We all do.
we do. And I think that's why I get so stressed, because I tend to fill up my weekends with stuff. Like I have different courses that I'm doing and running and like other stuff. And I keep doing stuff on the weekends, or like I'll do a workation, and then I feel exhausted because I haven't had a weekend of nothingness in a long time. And, you know, I think really need to learn to either keep one day a week or figure out how much I need, but just schedule in what I call my lazy days, where I just sit and do nothing.
Yeah, I think you have to treat them like an essential practice, and as essential as anything else, as work, as doing the housework. Otherwise, you'll guilt yourself out of it. And this is why chronic fatigue has been the ultimate leveler for me, because it's physically stopped me from doing all the fidgeting about that I would have done on a quote unquote rest day. Like I would, at my worst, I'm a lot better now, but at my worst, I wouldn't be able to hoover more than one room at a time, because I'd get so tired. And that stopped me, because previously I'd be like, okay, it's a rest day, I'm going to chill out. So all I'm going to do is this short list of things: groceries, clean the entire house, go and feed some cats in the neighborhood, go and do X, Y, and Z. I'll just write one blog post, but it's not really work, and I would just give myself a list of tasks on a Sunday. And when I got to the point that I physically couldn't, because doing one thing, like hoovering one room or cooking myself one meal, took everything out of me, that's when I learned what rest is. And now that I'm getting my energy back, my job is to not run away with myself again, but to go, okay, it's fine if I do nothing for an hour. It's good if I do nothing for an hour.
Yeah, it's productive to do nothing for an hour, because it gives your body a chance to rest. So we've been talking a lot about like learning to listen to yourself and listen to your body, but what does this mean? Like, what is it that we need to pay attention to?
That's an interesting question. I think it works on so many levels.
I know.
What we need to pay attention to. Like on the physical sort of here and now 3D world level, it's you need to listen to what your body is screaming at you sometimes. So if your legs are tired, if your ankles are sore, if you're injured and you've been ignoring it, if you've got, I'm terrible for ignoring my body. I've been ignoring food intolerances for years as well, just thinking, I'll just take an antihistamine and eat what I want. I'm terrible for that. So I think on the physical level, it's about listening to your body, but then it goes much deeper as well, because there's also the emotional stuff. So not just stop yourself from doing too much, but understand why are you doing too much in the first place? What is the unconscious or the subconscious pattern you're playing out? Whose voice is it in the back of your head telling you that you're lazy and you should get up and do the housework, even though you've just done a 20-mile hike? I think really for me, I had to go a lot deeper before I started to correct my behaviors, because just telling myself not to clean the house wasn't enough, and ultimately it wouldn't work because I'd get up and do it. So it's understanding why I felt like that, starting to do a bit of work on myself. And for me, that work has really come in the form of writing. I've been writing a lot more personal stuff recently and sharing on medium.com, and that's been really good for me to just think it out and sort of getting it on paper and looking at it, and then have other people reading it and commenting on it. It's made me go, this is actually really understandable when you look at what was driving me to behave that way. And now that I understand it, I can unclench a bit.
Do you have any plans to write a book about this journey?
Yes, I've already named it. My Instagram is called Running With My Mind, so it makes sense that the book will be the same thing. But yes, absolutely. It'll be sort of a part B to my first book, The Musings of an Elective Orphan, which is where I wrote about sort of my childhood. I had a difficult childhood, abusive parents. I left home at 16. And then I talk about growing up without the structure of a parent keeping an eye on you and all the silly things that I did. And I also talk about that first marathon as well, and the bad marriage that led to it. So I thought it would be a good sort of part B, a follow-up to that book. But I'll focus a bit more on the running.
Oh, good. Good. So what are your plans to prevent burnout once you start training for marathons again?
Well, I really feel like I'm quite a different version of me now. I'm like Sarah 2.0. Now that I've started to peel away the layers and really look at the psychology behind why I was doing what I was doing, I don't feel like I could do that to myself again. So I've changed my way of working. I haven't yet started to train again, but when I do start to train, I will be very, very careful. And it needs to be a balance. Whereas I used to do that thing a bit like what you were describing with the colour blocking in the diary. I used to plan out my work, and it was a very full week of work. And then I'd plan out my running in a different colour and layer them over each other.
Ooh.
I need to stop doing that. And I think everything needs to be one colour in a sense. Like I'm either doing something or I'm not doing something, if you know what I mean. So my diary needs to be like, right, it's activity time, and that activity might be work or it might be training. And then it's not activity time, which is I'm doing nothing. I'm not cleaning the house. I'm not writing a blog post. I'm not going for a run, to make sure that I do actually have nothing time, because that's really important. Yeah, and just being sensible, and being much more aware of myself now. And probably getting a few friends to keep an eye on me as well, because just in case I go off the rails again. But yeah, my running friends are very aware of how I've got myself to this state. So I think they'll be keeping an eye on me as well. And that's really important, because we can kind of kid ourselves when it's just you. You can kid yourself. Oh, I'm not doing it. It's just this one time. It's just an extra marathon. I'm just going to do an ultra this year, but it's okay. I'm going to be supervised.
Good.
Which I think will help.
So when you get back into racing, how many races are you planning to run your first year? What do you think is the right frequency for you, at least starting out? So
I think the right frequency for me is going to be one marathon a year until I can prove to myself that I'm responsible. So, so I've got a half marathon planned for next spring.
Ooh.
And then if we're able to get a place, and I don't know if we will be able to, but a client of mine asked me if I'd do the Nice to Cannes marathon with her in November 2021. So if we can get a place, then I'm very tempted to do that. It's a whole year away from now. It'll be her first marathon. So I'll have the pressure off me to try and perform, because I'll just be pacing my friend, which will be lovely. And we'll be talking and enjoying the sights. And I think it's largely downhill as well. So that sounds really good to me. But more than that, what I really wanted to say is I don't think it's a case of how many marathons in isolation. It's how many marathons compared to how much working I'm doing. So I need to stay flexible. Where I used to plan my racing calendar like a year in advance, I'd get super excited, book a load of events, just spank my credit card, book a load of events and be like, I'm going to hit all of these. And then I'd have this sort of list of things to hold myself accountable to, which was actually, it sounds motivating, but it was actually something to punish myself with, because I couldn't miss a race because I'd spent money on it and there are no refunds, and I put all this training in, so I have to do it. And I've told everyone on Instagram I'm going to do it. So that was making me do all these races that I really wasn't healthy enough for. So I think I'm going to be more flexible. I'm going to try and leave booking to the last minute, and I'm going to play it by ear depending on how much work I've got, because that's what I got wrong before. So I'm going to be looking at overall activity, not just keeping work and running separate. I need to think of it all as doing and not doing.
Yeah, how it fits together.
Yeah.
So what's the most important thing you'd say that you've learned from this journey?
It's really the mental side of things. I mean, I've learned a lot about the body and training and sports and recovery. But yeah, nothing you couldn't read from learning a couple of good books. What I've really learned, the biggest lesson has been the mental and the emotional side of it. And it's kind of a bit spiritual as well, because humans have this innate drive for purpose. And for me, I wasn't getting enough purpose from my work. So I was pushing myself to do extracurricular activities to get my purpose. And that was quite addictive. So I was doing more and more and more. So I think learning that I needed to find more purpose in my work by shifting my work to be just more of what I really care about. That's given me more balance. So it's really that. And also understanding what was driving me. It wasn't just a pure love for running or a pure obsession with getting marathon medals. It was this darker aspect of, you're lazy, you shouldn't need to take a whole day off to sit on the sofa, blah, blah, blah. It was all of that stuff. It was the voice of my grandmother in my head telling me that I was lazy or whoever it is for you. I'm sure everyone's got someone in their childhood memories echoes about in there and says negative things about their career choices. We've all got that. And coming to terms with all of that has been the biggest lesson for me, because now I understand myself a lot better.
Excellent. So what would you say are your top tips for other people so that they can pursue their physical and other interests and prevent burnout?
Yeah, so I guess this is a bit of a summary for you guys then. So you must schedule in rest days, as I said. You can't just think rest will happen. It won't, because something will get you up. It'll, the cat will throw up on the rug and you'll get up and clean it. And then you'll be like, oh, while I'm up, I'll just do a bit more cleaning. You've got to really be strict with yourself about rest time. Working, sitting down isn't resting. Your legs are getting a rest, but the rest of your body isn't. Your brain, your adrenal axis, you're still wearing yourself out. This is where adrenal fatigue comes from, I'm sure of it. And also supplements and caffeine are not substitutes for rest and sleep. And I tried to push through on supplements and caffeine and I got worse. And there's no right or wrong as well for like how many races you can do each year, whatever your distance is. It's entirely personal, and one year won't be like another for you. It will depend what else is going on in your life. If you're moving house, if you're getting divorced, if you're going through any sort of emotional upheaval, that takes its toll on you as well. And you've got to factor in time to just rest and recover.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm learning now from this conversation, I'm realizing that I need to schedule in my rest days and just really make sure that they happen. Because if something's not in the calendar, then it doesn't happen. And I feel like I need to like fill it up with something else because I've got all this time. I can do a new thing, or I can do another thing, or, and rest needs to be a thing, a valid thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you struggle with that, maybe there's a mental trick you can use, like renaming it. Maybe you don't call it rest. Maybe you call it something else. Yeah. If it feels less icky to call it something else. But yeah, you do have to schedule it in.
Yeah, but it's a hard balance to find, because it's like sometimes I wonder if I'm pushing myself enough, and at the same time I fear I'm going to push myself too hard. So how do you think people can find that balance?
So as to not give you something fluffy and unhelpful, like, oh, it's entirely individual, listen to your body. Here's something mathematical. How about the 80-20 Pareto's principle? That applies to everything in the world ever. Don't know why, but it works for everything, whether it's economics, maths, marketing, dieting, whatever it is. 80% go for it, 20% sit on the sofa. Yeah. That's a good balance. I've been thinking a lot about the 80-20 rule recently because I've been writing about it in terms of marketing. And it makes me think about where else in life it can apply to, because it's not a marketing rule. It came from a land study in Italy, didn't it? Yeah. So, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, just go and Google Pareto's principle and Wikipedia will explain it to you. It's this sort of magic ratio that I don't know why it works, but if you spend 4/5 of your time working really hard, I reckon you should spend 1/5 of your time, that 20%, chilling out. And that seems like a really sensible balance to me.
That sounds good. I'll have to go and calculate my calendar now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my calendar is more like 98% full of stuff and 2%. Oh, yeah. I really need to do a calendar overhaul. And this is the time of year when I do it. So this is absolutely perfect time for this conversation. So thank you so much for joining us today. I think this has been such a useful conversation, not just for me personally, but for everyone listening to this. And this, of course, doesn't just apply to running. It applies to hiking, cycling, working, whatever it is that you do in life. Most people aren't just sitting, doing nothing or reading a book. This applies to just every parts of our life. So thank you for this. So where can people find you online?
So I'd really love to have some more Instagram followers. So if you're on Insta, come and find me at Running With My Mind, all one word. I am on YouTube as a runner. I've got a marketing channel. It's a bit boring and dry. I've got a running channel. I haven't uploaded anything for ages because I've been ill and not running. But if you are morbidly curious to see my gradual decline into burnout, there are some old running videos. Just go onto YouTube. If you look for Running With My Mind Richmond Park Marathon, you'll see I think that was the last marathon I did before I got burnt out. And then it's all downhill from there. Okay.
And I'll look for that and link to that in the show notes so that we can all see the signs of burnout.
See it in action.
That's really, really rough. But I'm really glad that you're kind of coming out the other side and you've learned from it, and hopefully we'll be able to avoid this in the future.
Well, as an author, it's all excellent book material, so I'm sure I'll cash in on this one day. It's been worth it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you look back in time and you're like, oh, I'm really glad I went through that. That was great. But when you're in the middle of it, it's like, this is crappy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
It's a good analogy for a marathon.
Yeah, it is. It is.
You hate it until 26 miles, and the last 0.2 miles, you're like, yeah, I love running. And then you get a marathon and a beer and you go home.
That happened to me on my 10K. It was so hard because it was so hilly, and I was like, when is it going to be over? When is it going to be over? It's only 10K. And then it was over, and I ran through the little finish sign, and I was like, oh, I want more.
Yeah, it's weird like that, isn't it?
Oh, these are all like good lessons for life. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your tips. And everyone, please follow Sarah on Instagram, check out her YouTube, and check out her Medium. We're going to link to that in the show notes. You've got some really, really useful stories and really interesting stories to tell. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you found that interesting and useful. Please drop me a line and let me know what you thought about this week's episode. You could email me at holly@hollywharton.com or find me online and get in touch there. Now, if you get value from this episode, I would love for you to join me on Patreon. If you head to patreon.com/hollywharton, that's patreon.com/hollywharton, you can join me there. Membership starts at just $1 a month, and you get exclusive access to stuff I don't share anywhere else, including a monthly Q&A, and depending at the tier you sign up at, you can get access to all of my ebooks. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. It would mean the world to me. Before I wrap up, I wanted to remind you to visit hollywharton.com/380 for the show notes on this episode. Thank you. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollywharton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.